from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
We have reached the penultimate week of the CFL's regular season, and just when you think you've got it all figured out, situations change, coaches are making changes. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network, so pleased that you've joined myself and our always brilliant panel. Folks, he is the face and the voice of the Couch Potato Diary, or podcast covering sports for all fans and lovers. Peter Klein, thank you for joining us, partner.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, at the beginning of the season, this beard was basically down to the stubs, and now you can see the rigors of the season wearing on us. But it's a fun time of year for sure.
Oh, it really, really is. I'll tell you. Now, speaking of a media member who's doing their own thing on multiple platforms, the Niagara Sports Report is the hot spot for information, scores, and stories in the region. Congrats to you, and always thank you for checking in, Rod Mawhood. Great to see you, partner.
Bubba, good to see you. Peter, Mark, looking forward to this.
And you know what? Every time you put together a show like this, every reputable roundtable requires a Hall of Famer. He is the voice of the Calgary Stampeders on QR Calgary 770 and 107.3. Mark Steven, thanks for joining us.
Welcome. Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to get ready to go to Hamilton. So there you go.
Oh, geez. Yes, a big game. And unfortunately, it doesn't mean it's as much as we would love it to, but I think it's going to be a good contest regardless. Let's start here, guys, because I think it really is the story of the season. These Saskatchewan Roughriders, 7-game winless skid. It looked like they were going to follow the patterns that they've always done so after Labor Day, but that has not been the way. They have found a way to win 4 straight and have an opportunity to possibly win the West. Mark Steven, you're so close to this team. What's happened?
Yeah, what has happened? They really turned it around. They looked somewhat discombobulated. Obviously, the quarterbacking issue was a problem for some of those games, but Harris is back, and Harris is rolling. He's connected with his receivers. The ground game is certainly picked up. Certainly they had some a boost there with Armstead when he came over from Ottawa, and maybe it just is their year. I mean, that goofball interception where it went 9 different touch points before it ends up in Allen's hand and he runs it to the end zone. Maybe that's a sign this is their year, because I could never duplicate that, but they did it. And they do have a good defense, so I like them. I think Winnipeg better watch out.
Peter, I mean, they brought Corey Mace in there to change the dynamics, not only just in terms of scheme, but also change around the locker room and the attitudes. But yeah, when they went into that, hadn't won a game in 7, it's like, the same old Rough Riders. I'm not saying that any longer.
No, it's been really a tale of 3 seasons. At the beginning of the year, they go on a winning streak, and it just seemed like everything was breaking their way. Strange interceptions in games and things like that. And then they go on 7-game losing streak, or winless skid, I guess, with the Ottawa, whatever that was, mixed in there. And it just seems like nothing is going their way. And now in this, like Mark said, it would take us about 100 tries to try to duplicate what happened on that bouncing interception. And it has been quite the turnaround. And I do think Corey Mace is obviously a big part of that. I know we can get that ready for the social breakout. Coach important to football team. But I think he has done a really good job with kind of reestablishing a culture there in Saskatchewan. For a few years, for a long time, we knew what a Saskatchewan Roughrider type of a player was. And then the Chris Jones thing happens, and they kind of got separated from that identity for a while. And it feels like they've kind of come back to that. You watch every play against BC when the Lions have the ball, and when it's not bouncing off of 8 things to a guy, there's 3 or 4 or 5 riders there. And even though it's tough to say that deflection interception, there's Saskatchewan did this to cause that. But you look at that play, there's 4 dudes around that ball. And every single one of those plays, there are 4, 5, 6 riders rallying to the football. I think there is a real culture that Corey Mace has brought back to this Riders team. And it wasn't going great in the middle part of the year, but they're healthy now. And this whole peaking at the right time thing. Yeah, I just feel like Corey Mace has this team playing the type of football that he's wanted them to play all season long.
You talk about health, and Rod, there's no doubt having a healthy Trevor Harris has made a huge difference for this club.
I want to echo something that Mark and Peter both touched on. Obviously, we can talk about the defense, we can talk about luck, we can talk about Corey Mace, but the Roughriders are averaging almost 35 points a game over the course of the last month. So you talk about Harris leading the offense there. That offense is rolling, and we know what confidence can do, especially in this league. So, yeah, the Roughriders are the team to definitely watch right now.
And Mark, it's crazy to me that, you know what, that old saying, I'm probably going to say it wrong, about someone else's pieces of junk turning out to be a piece of gold for someone. I mean, what are the Ottawa Redblacks thinking right now? I guess you can't take things back, but releasing Raquel Armstead, like, as well too, as a running back, he has added that two-prong factor that the ball can be put up in the air, but they have a reliable running back right now that probably has a bit of a chip on his shoulder right now.
Well, yes, I hear you, but unfortunately, he had an even bigger chip on his shoulder when he was in Ottawa. I mean, we're down there at the end of July, and he got turfed in the first 20 minutes of the game. He was just seemingly just out of control. He had two penalties, for personal conduct. They threw him out of the game 20 minutes in, and I understand there were other things going on in practice. Maybe he's learned his lesson, so not so much a chip on his shoulder. He got rid of the chip on his shoulder because, sometimes you wonder what's going on. They wouldn't release the guy with 600 yards unless there was something really serious going on in the background. He can play, there's no doubt about that. And, for his sake and Saskatchewan's sake, hope he can hold on and, keep his focus on the field.
And I do, sorry to cut off here, but I do think that has been a really big part of this as well. And I know, like, we're talking about, well, what's the key to Saskatchewan's turnaround? And the real answer is, well, kind of everything. But you look at the success that the Riders have had on the ground the last little bit, and to bring it up with Mark, but it starts with that Calgary game where the Riders had all that success with Armstead on the ground. For a long time, Saskatchewan's play calling was pretty predictable, where it was run on first down, and then Harris, you just do the rest on second and we'll figure it out. And that's not exactly an optimal way to run things, but now with Armstead doing what he was doing, with now Ouellette, who looked like he was shot out of a cannon last week against the BC Lions, that running on first down, instead of it's 2nd 8, 2nd 9, and now you have pass rushers who know what's happening, now it's 2nd 3, now it's 2nd 4, and that's a whole lot easier to deal with. And so that part of this game has really made life a whole lot easier on Trevor Harris and a receiving core that has lost Bain, but has gained a Keyshawn Johnson who looks like the real deal as well. And so I think that has really helped get this thing going offensively for Saskatchewan.
Yeah. These CFL power rankings, it doesn't really matter about the how many wins and losses you have. It's kind of like how a team is playing right now. I'm just going to go around the horn here. Rod, would you have the Rough Riders at number one in your personal power ranking?
No, and obviously Montreal, we'll get into that, rebounding with a win this past weekend against the aforementioned Ottawa Blackjacks, or Redblacks, pardon me. But there you go, thinking of getting some basketball in there. But yeah, and again, the whole, and I hate to use it because it's cliche in sports, but the whole culture thing with the Rough Riders right now, that has to go. You got to give credit to Corey Mace, bringing in those players that Mark touched on, that, you know what, maybe we're a problem in other locker rooms. Come to Saskatchewan, he's got him in check. So no, I would not have Saskatchewan there, but props to what they've done.
Mark?
I'd have them at number 2 behind Montreal. If you're asking for my power rankings, that's where they are right now. I think them and Montreal, to me, today look like the favorites to play in the Grey Cup.
Peter?
Man, that 8-game winning streak for Winnipeg went away real quick, right? I haven't really loved how Montreal's played since they got that little X by their name on the standings. So I personally have Winnipeg as the number one team. I think that the offense was clicking. It was an ugly football game against the Argos there. And so that certainly does erase a lot of goodwill. But Oliveira is doing his thing. That defense has been good all season long. And so I would put them as my number one power ranked team for sure.
Okay, I'm going to stick with you, Peter, because this is one of those things in sports where you put together, well, this should happen because this should happen. And you try to put something together as like we're searching so desperately to make A and B and C all work together. Tiger Cats beat the Argonauts 3 times this year. Yet the Bombers, who beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats twice, are dominated by Toronto on not one, but 2 occasions. And last week, when it really meant something, Zach Collaros getting floored 7 times. Now, is this just a proof of parity, Peter, in this league this year?
Yeah, I would say it is. We have been talking all season long about how unpredictable this year has been, which has been great for someone making their debut this season in a best bets piece. But you can see why the haggard look now. But no, this has been a really difficult season to predict. When you have, like, Montreal looks absolutely unbeatable at the start of the season, and then they get an injury with Cody Fajardo. So you would think, okay, Caleb Evans, veteran quarterback, can come in and just at least keep their heads above water. Well, that wasn't working. And so they bring in Davis Alexander, which sounds like a randomly generated name you would get in a Madden draft in 2007. And he comes in and leads the charge, and things are going well. And Saskatchewan, like we said, they get some weird wins, and then all of these losses. Like, you can go through this whole season and nothing has felt extremely predictable about anything this year. So no, I think that it's a lot of parity. It's a lot of kind of inconsistent play as well. But I do think at the end of the day, like, we have seen basically every team this year go on a run. Like, you look at the teams who are not going to be playing in the postseason this year. Edmonton, a few weeks ago, looked like they don't want to play them in the playoffs. Hamilton, Bo Levi Mitchell had that offense rolling for a little bit. There a couple of multi-game winning streaks. Calgary hasn't necessarily had that real long streak, but they were 4-0 at home to start the season off. Like, all of these teams have had these stretches where it's like, okay, that this is a real team. And so realistically, not a whole lot separates 1 from 9 in this league right now. And it makes it very interesting every week for sure.
Rod, how do the Blue Bombers lay an egg like that? I mean, watching Zach, hey, we're not trying to take anything away from the Argonauts. They obviously had a wonderful scheme. And quite honestly, that defense dominated Winnipeg in their first meeting earlier this season, in which was another low-scoring win for Toronto. And you're right, Peter. How could we just all of a sudden, I mean, last week I almost asked the same question, and it was Winnipeg all the way through. And now all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't know.
Yeah. No, coaching, parity schemes, but ultimately it's the 2024 CFL season. It has been crazy. As Peter touched on, every team at some point has shown promises. And Peter touched on, Mark, you can touch on this, 4-0 at home, the Stampeders. Yeah, it's interesting. There's no rhyme or reason for it, I'd say. It's the way it's been, a crazy season and entertaining. I remember, Bubs, the first time I was on, I think we were a month into the season this year, and we talked about the struggles of Zach Collaros, right? We talked about other quarterbacks that have had. We're obviously going to get into the Edmonton situation with Niagara native here, Tre Ford. It's been a crazy CFL season, and who knows? We could all be wrong. We could be forgetting about teams or not mentioning teams. In 3 weeks' time, there could be a new number 1 on the power rankings for all of us.
I agree. I think the regular season's been fantastic, to tell you the truth. Just, from a 10,000 foot level, all the different games, all the great finishes. I think it's been a really memorable regular season for sure.
Well, Mark, when Rod actually, he's right. When he was on much earlier in the year, I think if you took a look at these sort of power rankings, it was easy. It was clear cut. BC were the team.
BC and Montreal, right?
Mm-hmm. Now we're not. It's crazy.
Well, in BC, I think the quarterback thing has really harmed them. Just the take the presumptive MOP at the time, Vernon Adams, out of the lineup to bring in some guy. I mean, obviously he has a track record. I get that, but I'm just saying though, just to yank him from the roster. That's what I meant. A guy just came from, hadn't been in camp, just boom, you're gone. MOP, get lost. We got this guy here. He's not that he can't play, but to dump him in the middle of the season, it hasn't worked. How did that play in the dressing room? I think the evidence is not great.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Correct me, just one quick thing.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did Vernon Adams ever say anything negative about we're getting to the Edmonton situation with McLeod Bethel Thompson, saying some things that were kind of against the franchise. Has Vernon always played good cop there in BC or no?
Yes, he has.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And that's a tough situation.
Oh, you bet it is. I think he's been remarkable, the poise and everything that he's shown. He could have, with a couple of words, really ripped that thing apart. I still think there's a bit of a divide there or some uncomfortableness with the situation. But no, you're dead on. He could have shredded that team in a big hurry if he chose to. He chose just to, get out there, play, do his job, and be ready when he's called upon.
Yeah.
Peter, what are we supposed to think about the Argonauts?
Excellent question. And I know I don't know isn't a great answer on these sorts of things. They have been a team that has kind of boggled my mind all year because defensively, like you look at that front and, like they looked great on Friday night where it was Serezna and Rimolade and and McManus has been huge getting him back, at the linebacker spot. And so like you look at the sum of the parts and it's like, this is a really talented defense. And for whatever reason, for a stretch in the middle of the year, it was 30 points, 30 points, 30 points, 30 points. Rob mentioned that Ottawa Blackjacks, they would have loved to have held a team to just a Blackjack at 21. They were giving up a ton of points in this game. And then they go out there and shut down Winnipeg, another one in the 800 list things of this doesn't make any sense. And so when you look at going into the postseason now, they have the talent on the defensive side that I would not want to play against with my season on the line. And then you have Chad Kelly, who say what you will about him, but he had them at least moving the football pretty well against a very good Winnipeg defense last week. We know what Kadeem Carey can do. Deveris Daniels, like he is a monster as a wide receiver, and they've mixed in some McMahon as well. So they are an extremely talented team that it hasn't seemed to all fully click at any point this year. Like in the games that Chad Kelly has thrown for the most yards, they've lost. And now part of that is how football works. Like if you are down, you are going to throw more. But still, it is such a disparity that it's not just, well, they threw it a few more times in the fourth quarter. So they are certainly one of those teams where you look at everything, and even Dinwiddie as a coach, I think he's quite good. It hasn't fully clicked yet. But again, as we've seen with Montreal last year, all it needs to do is click 3 times in a row, and all of a sudden you get to hoist a big shiny thing over your head at the end of the season.
Yeah, no question. I'm with you that Toronto has not been the sum of their parts, because I think individually there's quite a bit of talent there. But here they are. They'll probably finish second. That's the way I see it. But, like they had the bar set a little higher than that.
Well, the crazy thing in our parts, we're where we live, we're grown. We're supposed to. We hate them. We don't like them. You're supposed to hate the Argonauts.
Hey,
they're a pretty good team.
Oh, you just said it. On paper, arguably, right? You could say from top to bottom, they have the most depth. I still think Chad Kelly is a question mark. I think overall, until if we see everything come together, they're a question mark. And I see the East, as we've touched on, all of us in this show, we don't know Montreal either, because as Peter, I think, said, once they got that little X beside their name, they've kind of, weren't overly impressive in their last win. So I think the East is very, very interesting.
Maybe it'll be a reverse situation this year where Toronto goes to Montreal and upsets the number 1 team. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. I think that's
it is funny that sorry, Bubba, but it is funny that Montreal is kind of falling into the same trap that they took advantage of last year, right? Like Toronto had basically everything wrapped up by September. So they played like 4 meaningful football games all year last year. And then all of a sudden, oh, hey, look at that. There goes Montreal. And now it's the Alouettes who are falling into that sort of a thing. And we have seen so many times that switch is really, really difficult to flip, and especially in this season, right? Like it would only be right if 2 number 3 teams met in the Grey Cup or something like that. But it's again, all of this is to say this is going to be really fun the rest of the way.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about the Alouettes. They kind of, I don't want to say they didn't deserve to win, but I mean they did just enough to beat the Ottawa Redblacks, and maybe the Redblacks actually kind of maybe beat themselves in that game. Yeah. They're on a 4-game losing skid, guys. You got BC right now. They've dropped 3 of 4. Peter, what team are you more concerned about going down with only 2 weeks remaining? Both are going to the postseason, but who could be in for a one and done?
I have more concerns about Ottawa than I do about BC, which is not to say I am lacking in concerns of BC. There's just more of them in Ottawa. I don't know what you look at on Ottawa right now and say, oh, well, no, that's going fine. Like the defensively, that they were really good for a bit, and then anyone who even thought about playing linebacker for that team got hurt. And so they have had some troubles in that area, and then also have had some troubles defending against some deeper plays. Offensively, they had a good running back, and as we have discussed, they don't anymore. Although the guys who they have there now are fine, but they make that switch, and the quarterback spot has been a little bit inconsistent throughout this year. Turnovers have been a real problem out in Ottawa, and I do think part of it is the schedule just got really difficult. Like there was a stretch there where they were winning a bunch of games in a row and it was good, but it was a couple against Edmonton and it was a couple against Hamilton while Hamilton was still trying to figure some things out. Like it was, if you look at kind of strength of schedule wise, when they come up against a bit more resistance, it tends to not go really well for them. And the playoffs are nothing but resistance. So I just worry about how they're going to handle that. I think long term they're going in the right direction, but I don't know if they have the horses to hang with a Toronto and a Montreal with how everything is going right now.
I was just appalled yesterday that Montreal was there for the taking. They weren't great either, but Ottawa was just fighting themselves. Some of those guys are lucky that Bob Dice didn't tell them to take off their uniforms at halftime. That was awful. Some of those penalties. Well, think about it. It was the Redblacks, battling the Redblacks. I say Montreal, I think, was there for the taking. I don't think they played that great, but when you got a team that's constantly taking yards and everything off the board, well, this is what you get.
Yeah, well, in that situation, I thought he was just that Coach Dice was going to just rip apart Nick Mardner, like on the sidelines after he decided to, he got rough tackled, but you just don't turn around and throw the ball at someone like that. Like,
and that was one of many in the game,
especially when you're down at the 20-yard line, the Owls' 20-yard line.
And that was one of many in the game. It wasn't just a one-off blow-up. That was one of many in the game. Williams at linebacker, too. I'm shocked he even was on the field in the second half there. I'd have taken his uniform off if it was me. But
you guys said it. Ottawa beat themselves. Montreal, 1 touchdown yesterday. That's it to get the win. That's not what we've seen from the Alouettes this year. And, it's I would say Ottawa is more concerning, again, just because you just said, Bubs, about the discipline, too. All that stuff this late in the year, not a good sign.
I just think BC, they can go to Vernon Adams if he indeed is the quarterback of the playoffs. They're in a much better spot that way. Maybe there are problems there, but Vernon Adams can help smooth things over pretty quickly.
I think that might happen. That's what I was going to say. I think that might happen.
Guys, I'm just here to let you know, breaking news at this point is that Rick Campbell has announced that Vernon Adams is the starting quarterback this week.
There you go. We said it.
So have at it, Mark. Go ahead. Like, now you know that who's going to be the starting quarterback. Does that change anything?
It better, better. Vernon Adams was really good at the start of the year. I mean, there's a lot of pressure there. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. I mean, there's banners all over the city and everything like that about the Grey Cup. They went out and spent crazily to, bringing Betts back, who himself hasn't been all that great. And, Rourke just hasn't fit in for whatever reason. He's been average at best. So I think Adams can help bail them out. He was the MOP, as we mentioned. He's maintained a really good attitude. I got to give him all the credit in the world. So, you know what? Maybe he's the guy that can help snap the doldrums, but they're clearly in a huge funk right now. And I don't know what other choice they had. I mean, it's nice to say that Nathan Rourke's our guy, Captain Canada, coming back home, but it isn't working. Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Rod?
I think it's good they did it now. It would have been more pressure going in if they now waited till after the last regular season game. I think the comfortability early on with that receiving core, we know what is, as Mark just said, MOP, most outstanding player. I think we're going to see a different BC team and a different BC offense this week.
Pete?
Yeah, I think it is the right move. It does kind of feel like it needs to be the last one. If this doesn't work, it does seem like it would be awkward to then just go back to Rourke and be like, you were always our guy, right? Like we always had no, end of season stuff. Don't worry about that. We always had your back. Like it's the move that you make when there aren't any more moves left. And so if Adams, he either has to be really, really good or really, really bad for BC. Like if it's 265 and a couple touchdowns, he was fine, then it is a story all the way up until they kick the football off. And then if you lose that game in the West semifinal, then it's a story all the way until June. It is a big controversy that they brought on themselves. And yes, it would be a lovely problem to have, to pick between the guy who was so dominant a couple of years ago and the guy who was flirting with breaking Doug Flutie records in the middle part of the season. But this has turned into a real controversy out in BC. And we talked a bit about Toronto, maybe not necessarily adding up to the talent there. This is a very talented football team. And I didn't think there was a world going into this year where they wouldn't at least be hosting one playoff game before they host the big one at the end. But it is just mind-boggling to me where this has gone. And a lot of it does go to the quarterback. And I think now, like, this has to turn immediately, or else it continues to be a giant headache out on the West Coast.
Can we all agree that Vernon Adams and Nathan Rourke will not be on the same roster next season? That's all. That's
No discussion here. Yeah, I think they just can't. I mean, because the other thing too, as I understand it, Rourke's salary goes way into orbit next year. He's making a lot of money this year, but much more next year. But Adams isn't going to stick around for that.
And give Vernon a lot of props. Like, that situation could have gotten, especially once they started to lose, it could have gotten pretty sticky. But Peter, again, I'll come back to you. I'll start this, and we go around the horn on this. What was the difference? I know it was 2022 when Nathan Rourke was, the most outstanding Canadian in the league, based on 10 games at that too. What's the difference?
I think there's a few things. I do think that in that time, a lot of the receivers have kind of shifted over. Like McInnes wasn't in town at that point. Holland, I don't think. It's just that they have shifted a whole lot of the personnel around there. And also, you mentioned 2022. It's not like he goes off, he does the great things in the preseason and all that in the NFL, but he just wasn't playing the sport. And I will never dream of playing anything at the high level that Nathan Rourke did at that time in 2022. But it is really, really hard to take 2 years off and then come back and get thrown into the middle of the season when all of these guys have been doing training camp and all this stuff since May and getting that timing, getting that rhythm and getting everything down. And now you have to adjust. And when you were practicing in the NFL, there are obvious differences. Field smaller, people less. Like there's a lot of changes that go on. And so it's one thing piled on top of the other. Nathan Rourke is a very talented human being, but this is a really, really bad situation to just kind of throw him into the middle and hope that it's okay. You can do this with a defensive guy. And even I believe it was Mark who pointed out that Betts hasn't necessarily been a world beater since coming back either. It is different when you are just I don't want to say just a pass rusher because all of them are huge and could kill me. But it is different as a pass rusher where it is just, okay, that guy has the quarterback. I would like to hit him. With the quarterback and you're trying to read all these things and there's so much timing involved, taking that long off, it's almost impossible to think that it would go any way differently now in hindsight.
Well, and you look too, when he was here, at BC at least initially, his feature running back was Butler at 1,000-yard season. Dominique Rhymes is gone. There's just for starters, some of the key people there. Peter's right. I mean, it's all nice he was down to the NFL. How much field time did he actually have in practices? I'm going to say very, very limited. When you're the fourth string quarterback in
That's
New
what I was going to say, third or fourth on the depth chart.
Do a heck of a lot there. Yeah, he did play in the preseason, great, but we saw what difference that makes. The answer is none.
And who's he throwing to in the preseason?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. Third or
not
fourth.
Your first round picks and 8-year veterans, though.
Yeah, I'll compare it, guys, too. As you said, it's essentially 2 years off from an entirely different game, a different style. And I compare, I guess, as a former goalie myself, think about a goaltender that's off for even 6 months to try to come back at that level. It's not an easy thing. And that's why I could see BC, as Mark alluded to, with the salary, they'll keep Vernon Adams and maybe move on from Rourke going into next season.
It made sense. Believe me, I think what Rick Campbell did made a lot of sense. At the time when Nathan Rourke was signed, Vernon Adams Jr. was hurt. So it made sense, I thought, to go to him. I think they actually helped me out here, Mark. I think it might have been against the Stampeders. I believe Don Magala got a start immediately after Vernon Adams was injured.
Yeah.
And he was just clearly he wasn't the guy. Then you sign Rourke. So I get it. I understood that, you want to get him in there. But I just thought once Vernon Adams got injured and then, worked his way back, guys, that it just, that he deserved. I mean, what's that old football saying? Unless your name is Tom Brady, if you get injured, you're supposed to get your job back, right? So interesting. Now we're talking quarterbacks and back and forth. And Rod, I know this one's close to your heart. All eyes on the Niagara Falls native Tre Ford. He's back in the saddle in Edmonton, beats the Stampeders. Okay performance when you look at his numbers, high 80% completion percentage, did throw a couple of picks. But should he remain the starting quarterback going forward and looking into next year as the guy that they should center their future around?
With all the coaching changes, right, this year, obviously focusing on Edmonton now, I think he had that opportunity when they decided to go back to McLeod Bethel Thompson, and the organization said we have a better chance of winning when they still had that playoff window open, and they went back to McLeod Bethel Thompson. I think that summed things up. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're talking about Vernon Adams Jr. being the good cop and not saying things. McLeod Bethel Thompson did not keep his mouth shut at all. Unhappy with the situation every time it arose. I think, and maybe I'm being biased here, Edmonton should at least give Tre the start next year, but it's probably going to be a short leash. And I don't think McLeod Bethel Thompson will be a part of the Elks organization next year either. So maybe one of these quarterbacks we've just mentioned previously will be part of the Edmonton organization. Obviously, new ownership group coming in. Who knows? That could happen. But I think they have to give him the shot at start again. But I also noticed that when they decided we're going to go back to McLeod Bethel Thompson, there's not 100% confidence in Tre Ford yet.
No,
Mark,
that's
you
fair.
called that game?
He did have some very good moments, but if they set it up in the offseason to say you are our guy, but we're also bringing in an experienced backup. I'm with you. I don't see a circumstance where Bethel Thompson returns next year. Maybe it's his choice. Maybe it's the team's choice. But if you give him the offseason to plan around it, and put it on his shoulders too. He's always been the guy kind of running off the sidelines. So sign a veteran backup that has experience, somebody that can, if not mentor him, at least be a great soft landing spot if there are problems, but give him a shot. I mean, the bottom line is you look over the last few years, 3 years, his record of winning and the Elks' record of winning, he wins most of the games. I know he's unorthodox and maybe his stats aren't perfect. Maybe he has some gaps and some, lulls in his game, but they do win when he plays. I got to say that, even though McLeod Bethel Thompson's stats are better.
Pete?
Yeah, I want him to get a real shot, not just a couple games at the end of the season or, we're 0-9, may as well. I would like to see this actually go. There are some things that I think very clearly he needs to work on. When you start a game 17 for 17, accuracy isn't always an issue, but there was a couple of passes where you needed a little bit more zip on those things. And that sort of thing, I think, can come with time. The one part of this that gets tricky is, and it's I think an issue that Toronto ran into in the middle part of the season, because he is so different and his skill set differs so much from McLeod Bethel Thompson. You almost, if you're going to do it, you have to kind of go all in. And it's kind of like what we talk about around the CFL draft where, they have a Canadian at this spot, so maybe they need to draft another one in case that guy gets hurt, so you don't have to mess with the ratio all the way around. I kind of feel like if you are going to go with Tre Ford, yes, having a veteran backup is fine, but you kind of need to have wish.com Tre Ford, right? Like or Timu, I guess is the more current reference. Like you need to have the same type of a player, because the offense that you run for Tre Ford shouldn't look like the offense you run for McLeod Bethel Thompson or for backup quarterback X, right? Like it's what happens in Baltimore. They went all in on Lamar Jackson, and so that is why his first backup, I think they had like RG3 in there, and Huntley a mobile quarterback. Like they always bring in these guys who are similar to that, and so if you are going to do it, you have to dive headfirst into it. It cannot be, we're going to get him, and we're also going to get Dolagala as the backup quarterback for a veteran presence, because those guys are almost literally nothing alike when it comes to their playing style. So it gets a little bit tricky, because I think sometimes, and the reference with Toronto, they had Dukes running the same offense as Chad Kelly. Well, that's not going to work. And now it's working a bit better with Chad Kelly, but it didn't with Dukes because that's not his strength. And so if you bring in Tre Ford to run the McLeod Bethel Thompson offense, That's not his style. And they're trying to get him to be a better pocket passer, and he's improving slightly, but he's never going to be slinging it all over the field for 500 yards kind of guy. He's going to be the dual threat guy. And so you need to tailor an offense to his strengths, not just shoehorn him into this offense because this is what I've done since 2003, and that's how it's going to be. So you have to really commit to the Tre Ford experience.
Fair. No, that's fair. But and we don't know who's making these decisions because we don't know who the GM and coach are after this year, but if it is the current regime, they commit to him, the moment the season's over, say you go home to work, we have you pencil in as number one, we are going to sign another experienced backup, so everybody is aware which direction this thing is going.
He needs a contract, Mark.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
He needs a contract this year, Trey.
Well, there might be some money come pop free if MBT isn't returned. But no, you're right. He's a free agent. He might be on the lookout there because he probably could get something from somewhere else. And no, I understand that. And, Vernon Adams does too. So there's going to be a lot of intrigue there on the free agent market once it gets rolling.
Guys, here, I'm going to go back to last week's show, okay? And these are all guys I know, you guys know and respect. Canadian Press, Dan Ralph, covered the league for how many years? Eddie Steele played the game, also a broadcaster. And Hall of Fame voice of the Blue Bombers, Bob Irving. They all were in a complete agreement that Tre Ford needs to work on his passing of the football. Would you agree with this, Mark Stephen?
Yeah, I would. I think, as I say, in the pocket, it's nice to scramble around and be falling backwards and throw a side arm pass 40 yards down the field. That's great, but that's not going to be a recipe for every down success. So, but that's why you sit down with them at the end of the season, assuming you get the contract done, and say, here's the plan, but here's what you need to do. We're going to install you as number one. It's your job, but we're going to have to see improvement in this and this and this. So, yes, I do agree with those gentlemen you mentioned. That's an issue, but, get on it quickly, as quick as you possibly can, to establish some kind of continuity, some kind of goals, and some kind of metrics to see how he's doing.
My only concern, Rod, is that this is year number 5 for Tre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hard, yeah.
So, I mean, he's a quarterback. Throwing the football is pretty important, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree that he has to work on, again, I think Peter touched on this, just a little bit off on some of those long balls. There's obviously not the velocity on some of his passes. We know he can run. We know he can scramble. And I think that's kind of been taken away a little bit too. He doesn't have the right to freelance sort of on offense. They want to keep him in that pocket. And maybe he needs more of the Lamar Jackson green light on some things for him to succeed. Will that happen with whomever is coaching, whatever the ownership wants? I don't know, but I think anybody, you talk to some of the quarterbacks in the off season, you know what, I'm going to drop some weight so I'm a little bit quicker. I can scramble a little bit more. I can avoid getting hit a little bit more. It's part of the game. It's part of the position. I don't think it's disrespectful at all. I agree with him.
Pete?
Yeah, you're never going to fully change him, right? Like he is never going to be just back there, like I said, slinging it around like that. But it does, when it's 2nd and 13 and it's the 4th quarter of the West Final, it's going to be tough to just call a read option run and go for that, right? Like that there are times where you are going to need to get those big chunks. And so the passing game is going to need to be like that is obviously the biggest weakness of his game. And so you do need to round that out. And I think that is something that you use these, I guess now last one game of the season for, where I think, like I said, tailor an offense to him for next year. But for this one, it's like, man, for every yard you run is like 20 push-ups. Like let's actually focus on you being a pocket passer in this game, in this environment. And if you throw 9 interceptions, who cares? We're not going to the playoffs even more now. Like the result necessarily does. Like, let's just work on what you need to work on and grow that aspect of your game. And so there is certainly a balance that needs to be there. Like there are fundamentals you need as a quarterback, and throwing it is kind of up there. Yeah. So they need to round that out in his game for sure. 100%. Yeah.
But as far as he's concerned, I know he's been there several years. who stood right behind him? Has anybody pounded the table and said, this is our guy? Chris Jones really didn't believe in him. He played him only when he's kind of backed into a corner. He was all for Taylor Cornelius, a name now forgotten. But I'm just simply saying that he never really, when has he had the unquestioned backing of the organization? As, somebody pounds the table and said, go get him, you're going to be our guy. And I haven't seen that. Now, it's, of course, the flip side of that, maybe he hasn't earned it. I don't know. I'd be prepared to give him a chance, though. But understand, this is you have to work on your weaknesses, not concentrate on your strengths.
Yeah, I don't think signing MBT was really that vote of confidence that he was looking for in the offseason.
Chris Jones trying to keep his job, right? Like, he needed an insurance policy, I think.
Yeah,
Bubs, can we say, though, we haven't added this in the factor. Maybe Tre's going to say, I'd like to explore free agency, right? We're talking about him being in Edmonton. He's got that right, too. And that might happen.
It well could be, because I mean, one of the reported things that has come out is that, at the time, Chris Jones wanted to run him in certain different types of looks and packages to be diverse on offense, get MBT out of there, get Tre in there and run different types of packages. And from some players and from reports that are out there, Tre said, I'm not doing that. So, what do you say to that? Yeah. It's hard if they want to do that. Clearly, Chris Jones was in a win now situation and probably brought in, spent that, almost $500,000 on bringing in McLeod Bethel-Thompson from the XFL or whatever it was, or the USFL. It is a tricky situation because, Mark, I mean, you called 3 games this year where the Elks beat the Stamps. You look at their offense; they've got 2 good running backs. They have arguably the best receiver in the league in Eugene Lewis. They should have been better this year than they were.
Yeah, it was the defense that really let them down a lot, and it's some bad breaks. But no, their offense is very good. Jones is a very good receiver. Curly Gittins has made a lot of catches. They got 3 500-yard running backs. One's on the sidelines. I can't remember the last time that happened. I'd have to get to diving way back into the record book, but it's really a rarity. So, no, they've done well, and that's one of the reasons why, McLeod Bethel-Thompson was moving the ball and putting up stats, so that's one reason that he kept his job. The only difference is they weren't winning for whatever reason. Stats are nice, but the biggest one is who wins.
And I do think that this is kind of a broader football thing, is that just as a sport in general, it's talked about in the NFL a ton. Oh, just draft a kid in the first round and let him sit for a year. Let him sit. Red shirt. We like to use that because it's a college term we learned once. But this sport, no matter what level, it's kind of really tough to develop a backup quarterback, right? We've all been to practices and stuff like that. The backup quarterback gets almost as many reps as I do when you're actually going through all of those practices, because why would you? You have a game to go out and win. You only get 18 of these things, right? So you may as well try to win them all. And you need your quarterback to be as sharp as possible in those. And so it is just inherently really difficult to develop these kids. And so that's why we are seeing, when every team in the league uses at least 2 quarterbacks this season, and some of them, they have some flashes. Some of them, it's just not as sharp. And I don't know what the right answer is to fixing this, but it is really difficult to develop quarterbacks. And so that's why we're saying it's year 5 in Tre Ford. Why are you not a better passer by now? It's the same as the Nathan Rohr conversation. He just hasn't had the reps for it. So if you do kind of put him in as your number 1 guy, well, now he's getting number 1 guy reps, which is significantly more than he's had at any point during the season. And maybe that's where those things start to get better and start to improve.
Stay tuned. All right, guys, the week cleans up with the 3-pack of games, all with some interesting intrigue. Even though Calgary and Hamilton aren't going to the playoffs, there's certainly some interest there. I mean, now you're into that situation, I think, where you're looking at, well, who's going to have what job next year, especially for both quarterbacks of that team. You've got Ottawa at Toronto, clearly a playoff situation there, and Montreal at BC. Mark Steven, the game of the week is?
Well, I guess you'd have to say, if you're looking at it from afar, it'd be Ottawa-Toronto, because it has the playoff implications for sure. So, Montreal and BC are in the playoffs. This, I guess, for that matter, so are Ottawa and Toronto. But I think, the Ottawa-Toronto game, because it could flip home field for that game, is probably the biggest game as far as, the 3 are concerned and the impact it could have on the season.
Rod?
I'm going to say just because of the breaking news on CFL this week with Vernon Adams Jr., I'm going to be very intrigued and glued to see how VAJ performs back at the helm with the Lions. But obviously, playoff implications, the Ottawa-Toronto game. But I'll be very intrigued just because we're not sure about Montreal, and now we're very intrigued with BC.
I'm with you, Rod, because I need to see BC play better. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not convinced of that right now. Now, VA has did some amazing things for the first 5 games of the year, but I'm kind of with you there. And as we kind of all agreed to, Montreal they're kind of comme ci, comme ça.
Not sure, yeah,
so we need to see them kind of pick it up a little bit. Peter Klein, your game of the week is?
I'm still going to go with Toronto and Ottawa as a de facto battle for second place right now. I think, obviously, yes, Montreal and BC need to get that momentum going. And the implications for the Calgary-Hamilton game for next year, specifically around the quarterback spot, like you said, every quarterback involved in that game, there's a lot of intrigue there. But for Ottawa, I think that home field is going to be so important, given some of the stuff that we talked about with this group. And kind of now for Toronto, we talked about the talent they have, having to go on the road twice into environments that can be difficult with Ottawa and with Montreal. Those are both places that I wouldn't want to have to play if I'm going to go out and try to win a playoff game. So I think home field advantage is so important for Ottawa. They need this win this week. So I'm going to say that one's my game of the week.
It's Peter, right back to you on this. Does Drew Brown need to be the quarterback of this game? Does he have to be the guy?
I think so, yeah. I do. I think that if this team is going to get to the level that they thought they were going to get to at the midway point of the season, I think it has to be him. I also think you brought him in as a quarterback of the future, and so he needs to know what these types of games are like, where you have to win or else you're going on the road for the playoffs and your season's on the line. You need to know what this type of pressure is like. And the Masoli story has been super, and it was cool to see him come back and perform in the ways that he has and throw his name into this quarterback conversation that we're going to have, I think, probably endlessly in the offseason. But I do think Drew Brown really needs to experience what this is like. And I think Ottawa needs to show him that this type of a thing and kind of needs him to be what he was at the beginning part of the season if they're going to have a hope of being Toronto and hosting the East semifinal.
Mark, you appear in total agreement.
Yeah, it's the biggest game, and we'll see how Brown does. I agree. The Masoli story is a very heartwarming story, but boy, everybody reaches the end, right? And I just wonder if he's there. It just doesn't look like he's going to be able to quarterback the team to the level they need. I hope I'm wrong, but that's certainly what it looks like anyway.
Rod, your thoughts on that?
Atmosphere, intensity, this late in the season, you got to go with Brown.
Yeah, I think it's got to be. You're right. Peter, you brought him in for the guy. I mean, let's be honest. Right now, last year, we were talking about him as the guy that is the best second-string quarterback that needs to be a starter. So the reins are him. Rod, the story in Hamilton, in our part of the woods in Niagara, was so good. Like it was a real feel-good around here after Labor Day. And so many missed opportunities for the Tiger Cats. I mean, there's numerous games out there, 3 to come to my mind immediately, where this season could have been completely different for the Ticats. But yet they kind of rallied. I mean, there was talk of Bo Levi Mitchell. I mean, to the point that we were trying to, be logical in the sense of, and this is not just in Hamilton, but everywhere else, that, well, can you have a quarterback win a MOP award that's not going to the postseason? like that became a big issue. Now it's kind of worked itself out that probably won't happen, and Brady Oliveira will get the award. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that it's important for the Tiger Cats to finish up strong, because the Tiger Cats, for all their their goods and their bads, they've made the playoffs every year since 2017.
No, they're another one. When you think of models of consistency in the CFL, obviously we could talk about Calgary, but the belief was there all year, Bubs, and when obviously that ended, questions arose again. It'll be interesting to see if it is again. Bo Levi, we can talk about another quarterback. We can talk about that situation. It'll be interesting to see what changes, if any, happen in the Steel City.
Well, folks, we're going to get a sneak peek of what the Tiger Cats may look like in 2025. It gets going Friday night. Calgary Stampeders drop into Tim Hortons Field, and the Tiger Cats Audio Network will be there providing all kinds of daily content for our outstanding fan base. Pre-game shows begins at Friday at 5:30 as the Tabbies host the Stampeders on the Tiger Cats Audio Network. Look forward to it because I think it's going to be a biggie in its own little way. Mark Stevens, Peter Klein, Rod Mawhood, appreciate your participation as always and all through the years on the CFL this week. I love it so much. I know when I get so much fan response and people saying, get this guy on. What's Peter talking about? What's Mark talking about? It's always so good. It's all at the end of the day about the league that we certainly love to follow and be so passionate about. If there is someone that wants to contact you, Mark, how can they do so?
Best way is through X/Twitter at @MarkOnFootball. So there is Mark on Football, all one word.
Pete, obviously your winds of change are about to change a little bit to those 3-0 Calgary Flames. How are they doing it? Oh my goodness, they embarrassed the Oilers.
I wish I could figure that out. Yeah,
Jeez,
yeah.
Oilers,
the second the pressure's off. Yeah, the second the pressure's off, all of a sudden wins are starting to happen out here in Calgary. I don't anticipate that continuing long, but yes, people can follow me on Twix, as I call it, at Primetime Klein. And if you want to yell at me while I'm talking, I've been streaming my podcast live on twitch.tv/primetimepk every day, so check me out there.
Zary, Mantha, my goodness.
Yeah, where's that? Jonathan Huberdeau is back from wherever he's been hiding the last couple of years.
He's back earning his money. Rod,
Yes.
How can we contact you and find out?
I like that Twix thing. I like that Twix thing for Peter. But at Mawhood, RMAWHOOD on X, reach out. And obviously you can hear me on 610 CKTB and my show, The Niagara Sports Report, iHeartRadio, Bell Media, 610 CKTB out of St. Catharines and Niagara. And last CFL guest by week was someone that has been consistent with the Argos, Mr. Liram Hiralahu.
Yeah, he's
very much. Yeah.
It's amazing. Eh? I was thinking last night. Maybe the New York Jets might need him. Right?
Yes.
Geez,
well, remember he replaced Greg the Leg in Dallas at one point.
That's right. Yes. And then they went right back to him. What a dumb move that was.
Yes.
Guys, thank you so much again for joining us. This has been the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil on the Tiger Cats Audio Network. Check us out next week.